Okay. Hey everybody, welcome to a special breakfast time for some of us, virtual coffee, lunch and learn. Welcome to everyone here, and for those who may be watching this later online. If you're not sure what virtual coffee is, we are trying to be a welcoming tech community that allows room for growth and mentorship at all levels and create meaningful opportunities for learning, leadership, and contribution for everyone. To find out more, check out our code of conduct, see what's going on in the community. You can always look at our site, virtualcoffee.io. We're really glad to have you here with us today. This is part of our Lunch and Learn series where pretty much any member of the community can have a platform to share their knowledge, share things they're learning or working on with the other members. And it's just a space for, empathetic listening, empathetic feedback, empathetic support, but really just sort of like celebrating the people here and the things they work on. Today, we have one of our longstanding members, Rafi. Rafi is a developer in Bangalore, India, and he has given many sort of insightful talks before. I feel like Rafi has a love of doing maybe like deep dives and sort of peeling back the layers of applications that people sort of use every day. He likes getting into the internals of things, and that's definitely happening today, where we will be taking a look at React and how to build a custom React renderer. Rafi does not know this, but myself and Deck actually spent a little bit of time trying to do this exact thing, and we got a little stumped at certain parts. So I'm actually really looking forward to this talk. But yeah, again, welcome to everyone here. It should be a really insightful journey. And with that, I will pass it on to Rafi.
Hello. Hi. I think I'll share my screen. Can you see my screen? Yep. So this talk is actually about building a custom React renderer, right? And usually when we write a React application, we have things like divs, spans, your h1 images, p tags, and so on. And you also have your functional components, class components, and then you have things like props, state, and like you have other things like your standard error boundaries, life cycles, effects, and all other things that usually comes with React, right? And let's say you're building a React Native application. Most of the things are the same. It's just that the things at the top, the first one, right? Instead of divs and spans, it's probably view, text, image, and so on. And similarly, if you're building React for Canvas, most of the things here will be the same. It's just that things at the top, the built-in components, will actually change. So the thing at the top is your platform code, and thing at the bottom is your shared code. And luckily, React actually packages all this thing into a nice package called React Reconciler, right? And thing at the top is usually comes in your React DOM or React Native, whatever package that you're using. And React Reconciler is actually not as quite stable as your React DOM or React Native renderer. The reason being that it's meant to be a low-level API, right? And so they do keep changing it quite a lot. But people do use it to build a custom React renderers, and there are quite a few out there. So this React Reconciler, right, actually comes with two modes. One is your mutation mode, and another is persistent mode. Mutation mode is nothing but, let's say, you are building a React renderer for something like your web, right? Where the DOM is like, you can completely mutate it. So there you will use something like mutation mode, where you take an element and you update that element or delete that element or so on. And with persistent mode, you just like delete the whole tree and recreate the whole tree from scratch, like rather than mutating it. Like that's literally that. And yeah, let's build a custom React renderer. But instead of rendering to the UI, right? We will actually build a React renderer that renders to an audio file, which is like I'll actually render to a MIDI file, which I will play it using GarageBand. Of course, you can also play it using VLC or whatever. It's just to show you that React doesn't need to be just for UI. It can be for things other than UI, right? Let me actually open up the code editor. Probably create a file called React Sound. There's nothing in it. And I'll just initialize yarn. I'll just paste in a couple of dependencies here. I'll like explain those as I go through, right? Yarn takes its own sweet time to install. But in the meantime, let me create a app.js, right? And here, I'm not actually going to code in the web environment. I'm not going to actually use React in the Node context. So the code that I'm going to write is actually going to take a file, JSX DOM, and it's a Node script that it will execute and produce a sound. So which means I need to use require instead of import, since that's the thing that default supported, right? On React, require React, and I'll just create an app. Should probably be module. So here, the DOM that we are actually going to create, right? Since I won't have any usual elements like div and span, I'm going to actually define my own elements that I think should be there in this thing. So ideally, I would actually like to have a track, right, which has certain nodes in it. Probably I'll create a node element, and probably the node has a name. Probably that's a name. That's a node name. So the reason I'm actually putting it in a fragment here is because let's say later on, if I want multiple tracks, I could put it like this. So what I want is this thing to be taken in by the renderer, and it should create a track with a single node C4, which is your like C4 in the piano, and it should play it. Let's start with something very simple, right? And then I will actually create your index.js. Sorry, I think the installation has completed. And I'll actually see the font. It's too small. Import a render method. This file is not yet there. I'll create it in the later. This is our custom React renderer. And I have installed this really nice package called import.jsx, which will allow you to import a JSX file and transpile it on the file. That way, I don't have to like write any label, because like, why not? And I don't care about performance at all, since it's like one-time thing, right? So I'll just use this package for now, and this will be the app. This will encode the JSX file, which is after fields, right? And this will render the second element for this will be the file name. Usually in a render method, you actually give the thing it needs to render to, right? As a second argument. Usually it'll be a DOM element or something, but in this case, it is a file name. So I just call it test.midi. And the first element is nothing but your app. App. The reason I'm actually using React.create element is because I don't have J6 in this file, and I can't like import it again. Just to avoid that, I'm just using React.create. Stop doing something like this, right? I'm just doing it here, just for this file. And now what we'll actually do is go to this file, which is not yet there, and we will create a renderer. So first I'll actually import the React reconciler, right? Imported it, and I will create a reconciler. Here, React reconciler expects some config, right? And as I mentioned before, there are two modes, persistent mode and mutation mode. But in this case, since I'm writing a file, I actually don't need a persistent mode at all. I'll just use a mutation mode, and sorry, I'll use the persistent mode instead of mutation mode, and I'll just write it to a file. Since it's like it runs once and it is done. I don't have to mutate things. Right? So I'll just paste in some boilerplate code for the reconciler, right? Most of the stuff here, we won't actually use it because the reconciler expects these methods to be there. When it runs, it's just like we are just passing these empty methods. The only things that we actually need are these first 5, basically first 5 methods. And these are the methods that we're actually going to on, and the rest we don't actually have to care about it. We'll just ignore it from now. So as you saw here, I'm actually exporting a render method. So which basically means that first I need to put in a render method. And the two things that I was actually passing here, which is the app, right? And the file name, right? And I need to create a container for the React reconciler to say that, this is the container that you're actually going to render to. So I can literally say this container create container, and it expects a whole lot of arguments, like if a particular thing supports hydration mode, or if it's like a strict mode, or like so on and on and on. But the first thing that it actually expects is whatever you pass. And as you can see, React reconciler here doesn't have what I'm actually passing here. Here I could have passed in a DOM. I could have passed in a file. I could have passed in something else, like probably something, a reference to a console, like whatever. It doesn't care. It literally, whatever I'm passing here is just the first argument needs to be the container. And as long as I pass that, it'll just take in and it'll work. And I need to say to the reconciler to use this container. So I need to do reconciler update container. And as I said before, you can actually ignore it and just pass explicit null. But they are used for passing other arguments if you are using features on React reconciler. Like if you're using suspense mode and so on and on, like we are not going to care about it. We'll just ignore it for now. So that is that. And now I'll just put a console log here. You can actually see this is the persistent mode. I literally say persistence is true. I'll just put a console log here and I'll call it as type. Type and props. Right now, I will literally execute the index.ts. And as you can actually see, what it literally does, it literally calls this render method and passes in this file name and this, right, which is the app that I passed in, right? And for each node there, it literally calls the create instance by literally passing in the name of the node and also the props that were passed to it, right? React doesn't even care that I'm actually not even using the DOM here. I'm just using something else, right? So this is the core idea of React, right? So as long as you are able to say to the React console, like when these events happen, these methods, and these methods will guarantee you that certain things will happen in the host environment. And as long as that is the case, your app will render. It doesn't matter if it's like a DOM or if it's like a text input or a terminal or a reactive or a canvas. So here, what I'm actually going to do is going to create a node. I'll literally do type and I can do children here, which is an empty array, right? I'm assuming everything has like an empty children. When this has like an empty child, then 0. That's my assumption. And I will pass in a couple of things here. I'll just pass in a channel. The reason I'm actually passing in a channel here is to literally say that, if this particular audio track will play in channel 0 because MIDI requires each track to be set which channel it plays in. And I'll also pass in a pitch. You can ignore these. It's just like sort of default values that are required for MIDI. And this is the catch here. For each prop, right? I can actually do prop or name. Props are if a prop called name is there, then add it to the node. Right? And you can literally return node. React doesn't care what I'm actually going to do with here. It's just that I want it for my host environment. And similarly, if you want to support different types of props, we can actually like just put it here. If you want to, let's say, support a prop on I don't know, volume or something, you can actually put it here. That and also make sure that particular prop that is valid only for track, so that each track has a particular volume. So now the next thing that I'm actually to do is this is nothing but your something like your append children to the parent. In this case, since it's very straightforward, right? I have a children which is empty, and also have a child node and a parent node. I'll just console log here. Parent and child. And parent. I can actually see the track gets called for the parent, and this particular node gets called one time for the child, since this doesn't have any more child, right? So what I can literally do is parent, children, push, and child. You can actually see these are nothing but the values that I actually passed here, just nothing but the node here. So whatever I passed here is literally getting referenced everywhere else after this. Right? And similarly for the child set container, I'll just pass in empty array. This is another variation of append initial child, like which is supposed to get called on much later. And similarly here, I can literally do like these methods are nothing but a way, like they are kind of similar. It's just they get called in a different scenarios. This gets called initially, this gets called much later, and so on, right? So here I have two things here. One is nothing but, and which is nothing but the file that I actually passed here, right? And some sort of JSON. So if I actually log it here, let's console. I can actually see, I'll just do JSON.stringify. So just getting this object. Sorry. You can actually see this is the whole DOM JSON representation of this DOM, right? In a way that I actually want it. So if I paste it here, so this is what I have. I have a track which is at the top, and the track has a child, which is nothing but a node, which has a children, a pitch, and a channel and a name. And also the track has a pitch and a channel, right? This is what I have. So what I can actually do now is literally iterate over this array of objects, and I can actually create a sound file out of it. As simple as that. So if I do that, what I will end up having is nothing but audio file. I can literally create an audio file using this. So every time I run this, the last method gets called in the mutation, and I can literally create an audio file from that particular DOM. So to do that, I am actually to import a couple of packages. One is nothing but your FS. And I'll also import a MIDI package, and I will also import probably exec so that I can actually play the audio file after I generated it. Cool. So now I will literally go over here. And I will start creating the file. First, I'll create a MIDI file. This is literally to create the MIDI file where I will attach each nodes to. And here I will probably do it. I'll probably write that code just to iterate over this. So if you actually see here, the first element here is nothing but array of tracks, right? I can actually do track node, and I can probably track data track. And here I can actually iterate over. Sorry.
Your for each has an extra E.
Oh, sorry. That's what happens when you like code. Yeah. Now I will actually iterate over each children and literally take in these, keys and append and create a node and append that MIDI track. What we do node, right? I will literally check if node.type. There's a node. These are nothing but methods that are supplied by the MIDI library that I've been using, that I just imported at the top. And I'm literally giving in these default values to that, right? This is literally all the things that I need, I guess. And let's start. Right. I think I'm outside the for. Oh, I'm not outside the for. Sorry, I'll just write this file. Oh, it's domain. And I'll just open it. Right. I don't care about the run, whatever. So if I actually run this, it should open up the default the MIDI file that we generated, the test.midi file, right? Which the which I have specified in index.js. I have set my default MIDI file to be, MIDI file open in GarageBand. So it should open up in GarageBand and play the node C4. That's what it literally should do. Actually open the sidebar so you can actually see the file being created. Oh, I think I have made a mistake. Sorry. Oh, this is track node, right? It's a page. Debug this. Oh, track node on children is here. Track node on children is there. It's basically creating the file, it's just not appending anything. I call it as node. Okay, node. This actually comes in. Check these arguments. Bye. I didn't add this track to the file. I didn't add this track to the MIDI file. MIDI file, add track. Should probably do it here. After I append things to the track. So the track was just opening as empty. Yep. You don't have a single, I'm not sure if you can actually hear it though. Just turn this off. So that's a single node, right? It literally took the node here, and so they have specified C4, and it literally rendered that to a single audio file. The reason is actually choosing a grand piano here, Steinway's grand piano, is because that is the default instrument that is being library, right? But we can actually do better. We can actually specify the instruments that we want to play in, and why not? We can actually probably say instruments. Let me first say which instrument to play in. First, I need to allow the prop. What should I do? electronic guitar. Hope I spelled it correctly. Just type guitar. So now I need to allow this particular prompt to be present. So if name, instrument is there, no, I can actually say that if this is there, just add this particular instrument, right? Here, while I am generating the file, I can really do set instrument. So I can do track mode instruments, right? That is there. Track dot set instrument, and it similarly expects two arguments, which is first is the channel that you want to play, and it expects a hexadecimal value for which that instrument needs to be right? Actually played an object here, and let me instruments. So all I'm actually doing here is I have this hard-coded value, an object saying that this particular organ corresponds to this hexadecimal value, and this particular electronic guitar corresponds to this value, and so on and on, right? If particular value is there, I'm literally checking the string. Should be electronic guitar here. And I can actually, play that instrument, set that instrument for that value, and play that instrument. So if I actually play it here, oh no, don't see that. I'll actually open up. Like, okay, it's not an electronic guitar, it's bass, but you get my point. Like I can literally pass in different instruments here, right? And I can actually, for each instrument, I can like specify that particular value, which it corresponds to, find it online, put it there, and I can actually do this. What I can actually, I can take it further, right? I can create these high-level components, let's say beat, which literally gives you a beat, right? And it can be its own track. And then you can have something like a lo-fi sound that keeps playing in the background, or a drums. You can literally create like a proper orchestra, right? In fact, I have something. I have this really simple song that I've created in hand before, because I can't create it now. I'll just export this. So it has a couple of arguments in it. I will add that to props. Not delay. No delay. Right. And I think I need to add a delay in add mode. Can literally do. Oh, it's no delay. Sorry. Since the delay is in this video, we actually played it. So I actually got a song that to be played. Of course, this is like very straightforward, simple hard coding, right? But I can actually do better. I think I don't have this repeat, but anyway, it won't error out. You'll just ignore it. Get that. So we just created, I mean, it's a simple song, but we literally created a renderer that renders to audio. So that is the whole idea of React, right? You can actually take in the React way of thinking, and you can render to other things. You could also, let's say, create a server, Express server, a React code, which is not a UI, but actually a server, which renders route and which does backend things, but it doesn't do any UI. Or it could be a React way of query, which literally queries the database. Rather than writing SQL, you write something like this, and you get that, right? You get these high-level components probably to create, let's say, delete user. That's a component that you create, and you just use that to render to SQL. Like that's the whole idea. And the whole source code for this, it's this line, by the way. It's available here. Oh shit, it's not available. You can actually check it out. So it's very straightforward. It's very simple. And I think I have like few more examples here. That and this particular package that I mentioned here, that is also available here. And you can actually check out a couple of renderers that people have built in. So there are some crazy renderers like PDF renderer, your Figma renderer, a component that renders to Figma instead of the other way around. And there are like a lot of things that people have built in. Just yeah, that's that. Yep.
Rafi, that was absolutely amazing. I think that was really good. I love that. I love using music as an example of a renderer because it's such a great way to show like the point you're trying to make, right? Like React is just the interface. If you like the interface, you can just put it on the domain that you want. And if you use the reconciler, like you can just say how the interface maps to that domain. That's really cool. I really like that. A lot of folks in the chat appreciate it. I think we have a couple questions that are posted in the chat. Just want to talk about them quickly. Yearn had asked earlier on when you were doing that initial setup for the render function. He was asking, I'll repost it in the Slack so you can see, but basically just could you have called that with some alternate syntax? Yeah, like a more inline syntax with when you're pulling in.
Oh yeah, of course. I can because I'm writing bad code anyway, so why not go all the way around? Like since like you're not so
it's good and it works.
Yeah, you could probably do something like no, you can't. It needs to be transpiled. So this is a JSX, right? So you would probably do no, it is transpiled. Yeah, you're right. You could do something like this. That might work actually. Instead of returning this directly, you probably return a function, I guess. That's what you do. Oh, even this might be. I'm not sure. Oh, that works. It actually works. You could do that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so, David was saying also earlier, just I think like trying to put it into context. When we talk about things like HTML and sort of this tree structure, HTML is just a subset of XML. It's written with a tree of nodes and children. React is doing the same thing, right? Like you're making these components. React represents those internally as this tree. But you can hand that tree off to anything you want as long as the reconciler like gives you the sort of to get going from there. I kind of want to ask you how long did it take to sort of like assemble this? The first time I encountered reconciler, it was very daunting. It's got a lot of methods. I don't know. It was a while to figure out like what actually needed to change to kind of make these things happen.
Yeah, you're right because their doc is little like literally non-existent for this. And if you actually take in the persistent mode, sorry, yeah, the persistent mode, so mutation mode, it is even worse. Like it literally has nothing. Like they don't even tell you anything. So I had to literally kind of experiment with certain things to see if this will work, this will work, and this will work, and so on. Just to get the basic data and basically like go in the other way, trying to figure out what a React Bitcoin server actually is checking. Uh, since then, it's not existent. It probably took me like a day or two to get that.
Yeah,
But
and
yeah,
you mentioned the there's lots of other cool projects in it. I found a lot of people just like find a working project and kind of like go in reverse. Like, okay, this person's got it figured out, and like look what they changed, and you can sort of like go back and then pull what you need for what you're doing. But yeah, I mean, so you mentioned a couple other things you could see happening with it. Do you think would ever do that type of thing? Do you think that there are like other domains that might really benefit from having the React interface versus like what already exists?
oh yeah, definitely. Because you might have heard about ink, right? Which is nothing but UI for terminal. Instead of literally doing console.log, it allows you to like do this, right? It provides you support for Flex. That is the default stacking, I think. And you can actually use that to render to terminal. So that is like literally a thing. So instead of writing your usual DOM, but other than your traditional like UI, right? This whole idea of state and effects and so on, it could actually translate to like your traditional server-side rendered things. Let's say you're building, I don't know, I'm not sure if Remix has it though, but you could imagine something like Remix, which
Mhm.
like renders completely in the server, would have all these things, right? And you just render to the server. You just use this interface to like create an HTML or even do all sort of, as I mentioned before, database operations, create these components for database operations, right? Rather than let's say writing a native SQL, which is like hard already. And each ORM is its own thing, and you have to learn that ORM now. Instead of that, why not just have like a simple component that renders to SQL? So you just have delete user. You just call that delete user or return that delete user. As long as you do that, it does its own thing, right?
I'm actually really interested by the. I just it also means that if you've learned, lots of people know React nowadays. So it's like learning React. It's like, oh well, it doesn't just mean that like I'm doing front end user interface. Like, oh, I can go somewhere, some other domain. It's still the same thing. Like all the useful patterns from working with like the React tree structure still persist, and that could be really powerful. Like, what if you were just like, yeah, I write React. I write React on the back end and on the front end, but it's still, I just get to use the same knowledge twice. That could be really powerful. I think one more question. Yerna was asking, I think a few folks maybe mentioned this, like generating the MIDI and then pushing it directly into an audio stream.
Oh yeah, you can definitely do it. Like just in the just for the time limit and just for not figuring out like if in case it actually errors out in case my MIDI device is not set up or something, I just put it to an audio file. Literally here, right? React doesn't care what I'm actually doing with that JSON.
Right.
I am in this method. This is the last method that gets called, right? Here, this is where I'm generating the audio file and writing to the file. Instead of that, if I do the generation here and kind of push it to some stream, right? It will work. React doesn't care whatever I do. It just calls this method in that particular point. That's all it does. So we could do that too.
I really like that as a moral of the story. React doesn't care,
Yeah. In
But
fact, like you can like take in your as an exercise, you can actually clone create React app, right? And in the create React app, and literally where this renderer is being called, just instead of importing React DOM, you can actually import your own DOM and start writing things in that DOM using this. Try to figure out what you need and just to make that basic example work, and it'll work. Of course, you will probably use mutation mode, and it's a mix of the persistent. But yeah, you can actually get that working too.
And for anyone here who wants to try this out, like Rafi said, the reconciler is there on npm. Anyone can sort of pull it down and start playing with it. The React team does just sort of say like, hey, there's no promises here. Like it's out there, you can use it, but they're not planning on like putting the effort into like use it if you want is where they're at. They're optimizing for React, the actual like React for the browser, I suppose. But they just said like, but part of their idea and part of their vision for React is to make this type of thing possible, right? And it would really sort of like having this decoupling from this thing that makes this tree that's very, very at swapping and changing nodes, which is what like React's big MO is. Like it's just hyper fast at doing those types of operations. And the thing that uses that tree, keeping those separate is incredibly important for just like their ability to keep producing good work and like not having bottlenecks in terms of development, right? So this part of the API, while it exists, they're not like, use it if you want, but they're not gonna sort of hold your hand. I would still say like the best thing I found is this. Like I would watch this video, this lunch and learn, and then if I was making my own implementation, okay, like what are the things that he changed? And this was really good for just me getting to know like, okay, what the various methods do and what they're for. And I really appreciated just the console logs just to see what is the shape of the thing at this point in like what does React think the shape is now. And you can sort of go from there if you want. With that, what I want to do now is just do a sort of quick closing for the recording and say thank you to everyone who came out to watch and anyone who might be watching later. As we said before, these lunch and learns are put together by members of the VC community who just want to share with others, like Rafi did today. And it's just a really wonderful space for learning, especially for things that you might be interested in, but have never had the time or ability to explore, and someone else has, and they just choose to share. All of our members have the ability to do this. It's something we try and provide a space for here at the Virtual Coffee community. And if you would like to do a lunch and learn of your own, the best time to try is now. You can always just fill out a quick form in the Slack, and we help you figure it out. But with that, I want to say, Rafi, thank you again for a really, really, I think like a really wonderful mix of information, but also like surprise and delight. I do think you inspired a couple of people now to kind of pay more attention to this. I think it also demystifies a piece of software that a lot of people get mystified about, and that is React. And yeah, thanks.